Hello and welcome to another video. This is Swarthy Daisy with Kinfolk Chat, and in today's video we'll take a look at some DNA results of an African American female, a friend of mine who was so excited when she received her results and she wanted to share them with me. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the results. Here you'll see she has Sub-Saharan African at 86.9%. and that's broken down as West African at 74.5%, which is broken down as Nigerian 34.5%, Ghanaian, Liberian, and Sierra Leonean at 31.6%, Senegambian and Guinean at 0.3%. She has broadly West African at 8.1%. Then she has Congolese and Southern East African at 11.1%. That's broken down as Angolan and Congolese at 9.3%, Southern East African at 0.7%, and broadly Congolese and Southern East African 1.1%. She also has African hunter-gatherer at 0.4% and broadly Sub-Saharan African 0.9%. She also has European 11.1%, and that is Northwestern European 10.1%, broken down as British and Irish 9.5%, broadly Northwestern European at 0.6%. She also has Southern European at 1.0%, which is broken down as Spanish and Portuguese at 1.0%. She also has East Asian and Native American 1.8%, that's broken down as Chinese and Southeast Asian 1.3%. and that's broken down as Indonesian, Thai, Khmer, and Myanmar. That's how the internet said it's pronounced. The Khmer is Khmer. All right. Then she also has broadly Chinese and Southeast Asian at 0.1% and Native American at 0.5%. She also has 0.2% unassigned DNA. So here I pulled up this article that talks about expected African DNA results. Why are mine Chinese? And of course, we see the contributor here is Lewis Gates Jr. and some other contributors there. But I really wanted to highlight this article because my friend had some questions about how Chinese DNA ended up in her lineage. And again, I'm no expert on DNA. I'm just kind of researching as you all are as well. But I did find this article and I thought it would be interesting to add to the conversation. So the article begins, I used AfricanAncestry.com to trace my matrilineal and patrilineal DNA. Through my brother, Kiefer Mitchell Jr., the patrilineal results were traced to the people of China. We were both amused by the result and somewhat disappointed given that we expected results from Africa. I took the maternal DNA test and it traced to the Igbo of Nigeria. So Kathleen says, please explain the most likely linkage to China. My father always claimed that his lineage was primarily from East Africa. Could this be the reason? And it says, while DNA testing is a way to continue to trace your ancestry back when the paper trail is lacking, sometimes unexpected results can raise more questions than answers. There are a few potential reasons for this unexpected result. First, it is possible that you do have a direct male ancestor from China. In early 19th century America, there was a rapid growth of Chinese immigrants who were put to work during hard labor, many of them building railroads. Both African Americans and Chinese immigrants performed back-breaking work to build the infrastructure for America's westward expansion. Similar to African Americans, the Chinese were treated as second-class citizens and faced discrimination. Given these similar experiences and the proximity, unions between Chinese men and African American women are not surprising. Another possibility is that these results are an indication of Native American ancestry. Native Americans are closely related genetically to East Asians and can show up as Asian in test results. It's true that throughout American history, African Americans and Native Americans have had a complex and changing relationship, including periods of cooperation and periods of conflict. For example, the Seminole Indians of Florida welcomed runaway slaves to form a military alliance as U.S. troops sought to take over the Seminoles' land that they purchased from Spain. However, Native Americans also owned black slaves, and after the Civil War, segregated regiments of African American soldiers fought against Native Americans during the American Indian Wars. Despite this complex relation, there are many instances of intermarriage between Native Americans and African Americans, especially before the Civil War and the removal of Native Americans to designated tribal lands. However, DNA evidence has definitely shown that very few African Americans today have a significant amount of Native American ancestry in their genomes. In fact, according to Ancestry.com, the average African American is 2% Native American, while 23andme puts it at 0.6% Native American, and Family Tree DNA says it's 1.7%. So those stories many of us heard about the Cherokee grandmother with those high cheeks and straight black hair were most probably myths. In fact, the reason our grandmothers had those cheekbones and hair texture is usually not Native American ancestry, but the large portion, on average, of European ancestry in virtually every African American's DNA. And that, of course, was the result of forced sexuality during the slave regime. So even if your result is due to Native American ancestry, it's doubtful that you have a lot of it. So which is the more likely explanation? To determine which of these scenarios is more probable, you will need to know the Y DNA haplogroup. Haplogroups are used to identify deep ancestral roots linking early groups that followed similar migration patterns. As an example, this map from Family Tree DNA, it shows the migration of various haplogroups thousands of years ago. Haplogroups identified by a genetic mutation would occur in a population group over time that was subsequently passed down from parent to child. There are different haplogroups for mitochondrial DNA, which is maternal, and Y DNA, which is paternal tests. Major haplogroups are identified either by a letter and then each subsequent branch off this main group, or by a series of letters and numbers. For example, if your Y DNA haplogroup is E-M215, also referred to as E1B1B1 or E3B, the likely ancestral origin for your paternal line is in North Africa or the Horn of Africa. To learn more about this, 23andMe provides a good general overview of haplogroups and how they relate to genetic genealogy. Since your brother already took the test and the results were analyzed, you can ask the company that did the testing for information about your haplogroup. We did not see that information in the copy of the report that you shared with us, they're telling her, but if the company cannot give you that result, you should be tested by a company that reveals haplogroup results, such as Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, or Family Tree DNA. Once you know which haplogroups you belong to, you can begin to find more information about that group's origin and migration through time. This will hopefully help you to determine if part of your ancestry is in fact Chinese or if it's more closely related to Native Americans. It is also important to remember that a Y DNA test can test only the paternal line, which is DNA passed from father to son, and it can be a narrow view of your total ancestry. So while you may have a male ancestor of Chinese origin for this one line, you may have many other lines with African origins. Also keep in mind that results can vary from company to company and based on the data sets and methods they use. And that is based on the data sets and methods that they use. As more research and testing are done, more results can be compared to yield more accurate information. Now, another theory could be that the Chinese and Southeast Asian, which she has 1.2% Southeast Asian, the Indonesian, she also has a 0.1% Chinese and Southeast Asian. It could be Malagasy or DNA from Madagascar. I don't know. Again, we're just kind of working through this together. But I found this article, which is Radiant Roots Boricua Branches, and I'll make sure to link it below. But her blog post talks about the DNA trail from Madagascar to Manhattan. But in the beginning of this, it talks about Madagascar and DNA. And it says, over the past decade, there have been numerous studies done that describe the origins of the Malagasy, or the people of Madagascar. For example, in this 2005 article, it discussed the origins, or the dual origins, of the Malagasy people as being Southeast Asian and East African. And this study, of course, was followed up in 2009. Our results confirmed that admixture of Malagasy was due to the encounter of people surfing the extreme edges of two of the broadest historical waves of language expansion, the Austronesian and Bantu expansions. In fact, all Madagascan living groups show a mixture of uniparental lineages typically present in African and Southeast Asian populations, with only a minor contribution of Y lineages with different origins. Two observations suggest that the Y lineages with another origin entered the island in recent times. They are particularly frequent in the Tennessee area, and then it goes on to talk about that. But it says that's where commercial networks and the slave trade had a focus. Okay. They matched with haplogroups typical of present Indo-European, so Europeans, and Arabic-speaking Somali people. In addition, a 2012 study noted that most Malagasy people can trace their mitochondrial DNA back to 30 Indonesian women who made up the founding population of Madagascar. Given the fact that Southeast Asian Y DNA was also found among the Malagasy, it is assumed that there were some Indonesian men among this group of women. These women went on to have children with the Indonesian men present, as well as men from Africa. Later, migrations from Africa also included Southeast African Bantu mitochondrial haplogroups from north of the Zambezi River. And another article in 2013 also discussed the Arab Islamic contribution to the Malagasy gene pool as a result of the Indian Ocean slave trade. So that's it. I just wanted to take a quick look at my friend's DNA results that she submitted. So I'm so thankful to her for that, to add to the discussion that we're having on this channel and on this platform. And I wanted to also note that her family is from the South, so mostly from Georgia and South Carolina. So that is another factor in all of this when we look at her DNA results. I want to do more of a deep dive into the topic as we go along, because I also have two cousins who have a similar genetic profile, having mostly West African, having some European. They also have this Thai or Chinese ancestry as well. So I want to kind of figure out where that's coming from in more depth in future videos, of course. So once again, thank you so much for your time. This is Swarthy Daisy with Kinfolk Chat. Make sure to like this video, leave a comment if you have anything that you want to share regarding these results, as well as make sure to share this video and subscribe if you're not. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.